So welcome, and as I said, we'll be talking about tactics for addressing referee abuse in our webinar today. So we'll talk about two things. The first is how to identify this abuse, and the second is how to address it. For those of you who have been around for a while now, you've probably seen this presentation. However, it's not a bad thing to get a bit of a refresher. For those of you that are new, you will walk away from this webinar with a very specific set of skills that will help you to deal with coaches and parents who are making your life difficult and are keeping you from focusing on calling a game of soccer. So here we go. First, we have to talk about why it's important to address abusive behaviors from coaches. So I asked the question, why do we care? From the laws of the game, we care because this undermines our authority as the referee. But what exactly does that mean, and how does that manifest itself? So we'll talk about that a little bit. It reduces game flow, it reduces enjoyment for players and spectators, and can escalate or spread if not dealt with. The most common thing we see with situations where abusive coaches or spectators are not addressed and the behavior is modified is that the players on the field sort of feed off that negative energy that comes from the parents and coaches. So a coach might start in or a parent might start in, but the young players on the field who are still very impressionable at a young age will see these behaviors from people that they respect and are learning to follow the lead of their parents and their coaches, other authority figures in their lives. And so when they see coaches and parents conducting this behavior, they then think it's okay, and then they start to do it as well. And so oftentimes when we ignore a coach or ignore a spectator, we are encouraging everybody else on the field to adopt that same behavior. And so that is where I often use the analogy of a boiling frog. You put a frog in cold water and you slowly turn the heat up, and it doesn't realize it's in trouble until it's too late. Referees are the same. If you don't deal with the heat of the flame right when it turns on, the next thing you know, it's going to be boiling and you don't know how it happened. So we're going to give you some things to look for, to know that you need to respond to, and then some tactics for how to respond to it. The biggest thing all this creates is an unstable environment for your game. If you have coaches and spectators and then parents starting to scream and yell, then you're going to have everybody doing that. And that emotional instability on the field is going to lend itself to the kinds of fouls that hurt players and the kinds of challenges that we just don't want to see in a game of soccer. So all of these things feed into each other, and your game is going to be significantly easier to referee if you address the behavioral issues when they start. So our first step is identifying these behaviors. Any kind of personal insult. And again, I've tried to make this as simple as possible. If you wouldn't say it to your grandmother, then it's probably rude or insulting and doesn't have a place in the game. So let's use that as our threshold. There's no reason that we have to treat each other poorly on the soccer field. There's this idea out there that referees need to have thick skin, that this is a passionate game, et cetera, et cetera. All those things are true about the game being passionate, but I would also argue that rugby is very passionate, and yet they don't have the abuse of their officials that we do in soccer. So passion cannot be used as an excuse for treating other human beings poorly. And so use as your threshold, if you wouldn't say it to your grandmother or to your parent, then it is probably rude or insulting, and it doesn't have any place in our game. That has to do with personal insults, comments made directly towards you as the referee. If it's public, if the action questions you in a public manner, it insults you or calls attention to you in any negative way, then there's no place for it in the game. Because even if they don't insult you directly, if they indirectly cause your credibility to be questioned, then the players and the spectators on the field will start to think that your credibility is questionable. And that's where the boulder starts to roll down the hill. And so when players or coaches or spectators publicly question you or insult you or call attention to you in a negative way, we need to address those behaviors. If it's provocative, I'm not going to give you any examples because I think we all know what provocative statements are. Anything that has to do with gender or race or sexuality. These are all things that we should not be allowing out on the field. Generally speaking, if you would be shocked by what someone just said or did, then there's no place for it to be in the game. That's what we mean by provocative. If out in normal life you would be shocked by what somebody just said, then there's definitely not a place for it in the game. Anything more than just an honest and brief reaction must be addressed. I want to highlight this. Sometimes a coach is going to disagree, and sometimes they're going to have a brief reaction to it. They're going to, oh, come on, or oh, shoot, or dang it, or they're going to be upset for a second. Those kinds of things we don't want to respond to because that is an honest and a brief emotional reaction. Anything other than that, pointed statements towards you, under the breath comments, sarcastic comments, passive aggressive comments, all these kinds of behaviors all seek to undermine you in the eyes of all of the participants in the game, and therefore we need to address these behaviors. Now, I say anything other than an honest reaction, but don't let coaches have persistent, honest reactions. If they have an emotional reaction to every single decision you make in the game, then that, of course, is going to create additional problems for you. So the occasional honest reaction, no problem. If there is some sort of reaction from spectators or coaches to literally every decision you make, the outcome is still the same. You are still being undermined. The perception of the accuracy of your decisions is being called into question. So this persistent idea, this repeated commentary on or reactions to a referee's decision can still undermine the referee. And so if a coach is regularly challenging every decision you make, we need to address those behaviors as well. And again, remember, I'm going to give you very specific tactics on how to do that. So these are the 4 P's that we want to think about when we're identifying behaviors that we want to respond to. If it's public, if it's personal in any way, if it's provocative, or if it's persistent, these are all 4 things we want to be looking for as behaviors that we need to respond to. And again, I will give you what the response needs to be. A big part of this is recalibrating our expectations. Many of you out here, if not every single one of you, has been paid to referee a soccer game. If you are compensated to do it, that makes you a professional referee. You may not referee at the professional level, but if you are being compensated for it, then it is a profession. And if you are being compensated, it makes that soccer field your workplace. And so think about some of the things that are said to us as referees, and then think of how that would go over if you said that to your boss or to a customer at work, or if you said it to a fellow classmate in school or to a teacher at school. How long would you have that job? How long would it take for you to get kicked out of class or kicked out of school if you said even a fraction of the things that are often said to referees every single Saturday? So a good barometer for those of you in school or are working is treat the soccer field like your workplace. And if you are treated in a manner that would not be accepted at an office or in a school, then it's not to be accepted on the soccer field. We need to respond to behaviors that, generally speaking, are not appropriate for a workplace. So we need to recalibrate our expectations as referees for how we are to be treated out there. Because if we don't recalibrate and if we don't insist on being treated better, then there's no motivation for the players, coaches, or spectators to treat us any differently than they do currently. What I'm asking you here is to have a small role in changing our culture. Because if we all adopt this tactic and if we all address these behaviors, then we'll start to see a reduction in those behaviors. Are there any questions at this point about identifying abuse? If you do, please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature to type in your questions. Okay, then I'm going to move us along then to how we address the abuse once we've identified it. So there are 4 personal traits that you need to have about yourself when dealing with these issues. The first is that we need you to be calm. No matter what, we need you to be calm. We'll explain why here in a couple minutes. Now, every time I say you have to be calm, the first question somebody asks is, how can you expect us to be calm when we've been being yelled at for 60 minutes or 70 minutes or however long it's been going on? And my response to that is, if you've been yelled at for 60 minutes, then you waited 60 minutes too long to address the behavior. If you address the behavior early in the game, the first time it happens or the second time it happens, you should still be in a place where you can be calm. Yes, I agree. If you have been yelled at for 60 minutes straight, it might be difficult to be calm. But if you stop the game the first time it happens and you address the behavior, it should be easy for you to stay calm. And it's very important that you stay calm. And again, I'll get to that in just a moment. We need you to be respectful. No matter what you do and how you respond to behaviors that are disrespectful, you must be respectful. And the reason for that is what you're going to say to a coach might frustrate them. It might bother them. You might end up sending off a coach. And when that coach calls to complain, you need to have no ability for your behavior to be called into question. So if you are calm and if you are respectful and a coach calls an assigner to complain about it, the first question they're going to ask was whether they were respectful. And if you are respectful in your dealings with this, then you become unimpeachable, and that's what we're looking for. We need you to be courteous. Think like you're a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant and be courteous. You are not going to bend, but you are going to be courteous in these interactions. And we also need you to be firm. It is very easy to be calm, respectful, courteous, and yet still be firm. You can state a fact as simple as 2 + 2 = 4. And if someone tries to disagree with you, you can say, no, 2 + 2 definitely does equal 4. And you can say it in a calm, respectful, and courteous manner while still being firm that 2 + 2 = 4. And so when you're saying the sentences that we're going to give you here in a couple minutes to these coaches, we need you to have all of these personal traits. You must be calm, you must be respectful, and you must be courteous. Because at the end of the day, we only want one party in this exchange to be disrespectful or to be loud and animated or to be not courteous. And that needs to be the person whose behavior you're seeking to modify. If you are attacking the coach in a disrespectful manner and they're attacking you in a disrespectful manner, now all we have is two people that are being disrespectful to one another. And that doesn't help us to resolve the issue. So here is the method. First, you're going to explain the problem. And again, I'm going to give you specific sentences to use. Explain the problem. Outline the repercussions if the behavior doesn't change. Make it clear that moving forward, it is their decision. What happens next? And always check for understanding and say thank you. At the end of this, we always need you to say, do you understand? And when they say yes, they do, say thank you. And we'll get in again with the specifics of that. But this clarity, if you use this approach, makes it very, very obvious for the coach what the challenge is or what the problem is, what they need to do differently, or the repercussion they will suffer if they don't. Do not add more emotion to the situation. So once again, think about a customer service job where you're trying to calm down an angry customer. That's the role or the approach that we want you to take. Be thoughtful, be respectful, be courteous, but be firm in what your expectations are. Do not add more emotion, because if you are emotional, that's just going to add further fuel to the fire. So I want you to write this sentence down. Coach, your behavior right now is irresponsible. Please stop. That is the first thing that you're going to say to a coach when they are demonstrating some of the behaviors that we talked about a couple of minutes ago. You're going to stop the game. You're going to walk over to the coach. You are going to keep a respectful distance of at least 3 to 4 yards. And you're going to say in a calm voice, Coach, your behavior right now is irresponsible. Please stop. Now, There's a couple of things I want you to be aware of in that sentence. First of all, it's what's called a dead end sentence. There is no other response than okay that is acceptable. If they say, but I disagree, or if they say anything else other than okay, they are not following your instructions. Secondly, the word irresponsible is a direct quote from the laws of the game. So when you say your behavior right now is irresponsible, you are quoting from the laws of the game a behavior that is the only thing a coach can do to be dismissed from a match. So when you look under powers of the referee in Law 5, and if you look at Law 12, the reasons that a coach can be dismissed, there is only one, and it is called irresponsible behavior. And so by telling the coach your behavior right now is irresponsible, what you're really saying is what you're doing right now can get you dismissed from the match if you don't stop. Also, the word irresponsible is not a word that we use too often in our normal daily lives. And so that word in particular is going to be jarring for a coach to hear and is likely going to stop them in their tracks. So approach the coach, keep a respectful distance, and say, Coach, your behavior right now is irresponsible. Please stop. The second step, if the behavior continues, is Coach, your behavior right now is irresponsible. If it continues, you will be dismissed from this match. Do you understand? Now, again, we are quoting directly from the laws of the game here, but there's an important part of both the first sentence and this sentence we're looking at now that is crucial. You never reference yourself as the referee. So this makes this a non-confrontational approach to communicating this information. Now, oftentimes you'll hear people say, if you don't stop, I'm going to throw you out of the match. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That makes it a personal conflict between you and that other individual. These sentences don't reference you as the referee at all. It states a fact. Coach, your behavior right now is irresponsible. It lets them know they will suffer a consequence. You will be dismissed from this match if it doesn't continue. And do you understand? There's no reference to yourself as the referee or yourself as a person at all in these sentences. And that's done so deliberately because we don't want to create a scenario where there's confrontation between the two of you, that they have some incentive to try to one-up you. This is not about what you're going to do to them. This is about their behavior and what's going to happen to them if they don't continue it. And it's important that our language is very specific. That's why I want you to write this down and memorize this. Coach, your behavior right now is irresponsible. If it continues, you will be dismissed from this match. Do you understand? And then that part is really, really crucial. At this point in the conversation, you need them to affirm that, yes, they understand. And you can't leave that interaction until they say, yes, that they understand. Now, in either of these two scenarios, in step 1 or step 2, one of the most common responses from a coach is, what am I doing wrong? All I want you to say is you're behaving irresponsibly. They know what they're doing. More often than not, they are grown adults, and they know what they're doing is not okay, but they're doing it anyway. And so as soon as you start to try to explain what they're doing wrong, now you're into a judgment call about what's right and what's wrong, and you're into a gray area about maybe you think it's wrong, but they don't, and now you're debating what's right and wrong. Don't do that. If they ask you what they're doing wrong, say you're behaving irresponsibly. And if they say, tell me exactly what, say you are behaving irresponsibly, and if it continues, you'll be dismissed from this match. Do you understand? You'll only have to do it a couple of times, and they'll get the idea, and they will say yes. But do not leave that interaction until you get confirmation that they understand. Now, confirmation doesn't have to be verbal. If they nod their head, if they turn around and sit down, if they modify their behavior, excuse me, that is all of the confirmation that you need. That doesn't need to be, yes, I understand, ref. It can be a nod of the head. It can be them turning around and going back and sitting down. Those are all nonverbal ways that they're communicating that they understand, because now they're modifying their behavior. Never say anything more than that, ever. Those two sentences that I just gave you are all you ever need to modify a coach's behavior. Now, if you go through step 1, you go through step 2, and the behavior continues, then you dismiss them from the match. And all you have to do is walk over and say, "Coach, you are dismissed." And now with the new law changes, show them the red card. You are welcome, if you would like, at step 2 to show them a yellow card, because now that we are able to show coaches yellow cards, this is the moment where we do that. If anybody has ever heard the terminology ask, tell, remove, step 1 is the ask, step 2 is the tell, step 3 is when we remove them and we show them a red card. But please don't ever say anything more than that. Now, if they modify their behavior and they stop abusing you, or they stop disrespecting you, or they stop criticizing you, and you wish to have a conversation with them, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with talking to coaches, but only when the communication in both directions is respectful. If their communication to you is disrespectful, then all I ever want you to say is, "Coach, your behavior right now is irresponsible. Please stop." Any questions at that point? We'll get into talking about assistant referees and spectators here in a minute, but any questions on just that specific terminology? Okay. Spectators. Obviously, spectators can also be guilty of abuse, and oftentimes they're actually the worst perpetrators of referee abuse. And they have the same impact on the players that the coaches do. Again, oftentimes at the grassroots level, these are parents, these are family members, these are friends, these are all people that they look up to and whose behaviors they mimic on a daily basis. And so we need to be just as aware of the conduct of the spectators as we are of the coaches. Now, a general statement, you'll oftentimes hear some experienced referees or potentially some older referees tell you that you just need to tune out the spectators or the coaches. I strongly advise you not to do that, because the spectators and the coaches are all significant contributors to the environment, the emotional environment in which the game is being played. And so if you ignore a key part of your environment, you're ignoring some of the origins of your problems. A good example would be if you have a small fire in your fireplace and you ignore somebody coming over with a tub of gasoline. Ignoring a spectator or a coach is like ignoring a tub of gasoline. You don't want to do it because you're going to have a massive fire in your hands and you won't know why. So pay close attention to the spectators and to the coaches. And if they are behaving in ways that are not helpful to the environment, address the behavior. We had a question here. One thing you didn't cover in this training is step 3. What language? I actually just said that a couple of minutes ago. I said, all you have to say to a coach is, "You have been dismissed," and show the red card. That's it. If a coach refuses to leave, give them 1 or 2 opportunities to leave and then terminate the game. If a player or a coach who has been sent off refuses to leave the field, you terminate the match. It's pretty simple. So again, we talked about spectators, their behavior. We must deal with spectator abuse. Question here, are we allowed to give cards to spectators? The answer to that is no. And we'll get into how we want you to handle the situations with spectators in just a minute. So again, the method, never address or acknowledge spectators. Don't talk to them. First of all, you're never going to change their mind. I've been doing this a really long time, and I have never changed the mind of a spectator or a coach, to that matter, who disagrees with me. So do not attempt to talk to spectators who are upset. Now, obviously, at the beginning of the game, if you are running a line and you jog over to start the game and the spectator says, "Hello," be polite, say hello. I'm not saying you can never talk to spectators. What I'm saying is people who are behaving poorly or who disagree or criticize referees, don't talk to them. Nothing positive ever comes of interactions with spectators who are upset about the referee, so just ignore them. Don't address them, but do modify their behavior, and we'll get to that here in a second. Only ever address the coach. when dealing with the spectators. Do not talk to the spectators, talk only to the coach. And use the same approach that we used before. In case it wasn't more clear, I put it in red. Don't talk to spectators. So write this down. Coach, the behavior of the spectators is irresponsible. Unfortunately, we are not able to continue this match until the issue is resolved. So again, it's really important that you write down this sentence and that you use this language specifically, because there's a couple of important parts. Once again, the use of the word irresponsible. And secondly, again, you're not referencing what you're going to do. You're referencing the general impact that the spectators are having on all of us involved in the game, which is why, unfortunately, we are not able to continue this match until the issue is resolved. We, you, me, the players, none of us are able to continue this match until the issue is resolved. And don't restart the match until the issue is resolved. It's really quite simple as that. So I have a request for those of you who are typing the same question in over and over again. Please stop. So go to the coach. Coach, the behavior of the spectators is irresponsible. Unfortunately, we are not able to continue this match until the issue is resolved. And then don't move from that spot and don't restart the game until the coach takes care of the problem. Now, the first thing that a coach is going to say to you is, that's not my spectator. Your response to that is, okay, but they're behaving irresponsibly every time a decision goes against your team. So unfortunately, we are not able to continue this match until the issue is resolved. It's very easy to figure out which team the spectators are from, because the decision that you make that they start yelling about, you can know which team it went against and you can know which team it's from. So if you don't call a foul for the blue team and people start screaming at you, that means the spectators are from the blue team. And then you want to go and talk to the blue team's coach and tell blue team's coach that blue team's spectators are behaving irresponsibly. And unfortunately, we're not able to continue this match. So the longest I've ever seen this go is about 90 seconds, where a referee stood his ground and said, unfortunately, we're not able to continue this match until the issue is resolved. And a coach said, well, those aren't my spectators, so I'm not going to do anything. And the referee said, well, I'm really sorry, but we're not able to continue this match until the issue is resolved. And he just stood there. And this is where human nature will kick in. The entire reason that everybody is there is for that soccer game to be played. And for some reason, they are conditioned that they can't play that soccer game unless you give them permission to do so by blowing air through that piece of plastic in your hand. So unless you blow that whistle, they won't start playing. That gives you the ultimate ability to modify these behaviors or have these behaviors modified if you will not restart the game until the behavior changes. Because at the end of the day, one of two things will happen. Either the parents, who are not part of the problem, will start to self-police the other parents and tell them to stop, or the players will actually rat out the parents to the coach. And this was the example that I saw when it went 90 seconds. They stood there for a while and said, sorry, we can't restart the game. And the coach said, well, those aren't my parents. I'm not going to do anything about it. And they both stood there for a very uncomfortable 90 seconds until one of the players said, Coach, isn't that Jimmy's mom? And the coach was ratted out and he had to go and deal with the problem. So again, at the end of the day, we don't want you working in abusive environments. If the environment is abusive, stop the match, communicate to the coach that the environment and the behavior is irresponsible and that you're not able to continue the match until the issue is resolved, and then don't continue the match until the coach addresses the behavior. And if the coach wants to sit there for 20 minutes and not do anything about it, okay, no problem. You are not going to work as a referee in an abusive environment. And so every single time I've seen this in practice, eventually the coach deals with the problem and the game is able to be restarted. So just use this sentence, use this tactic. Do not talk to spectators, only talk to coaches. Assistant referees, don't talk to spectators. If verbal abuse begins, please raise the flag at the next stoppage. Call the referee over to you and ask the referee to address this behavior utilizing the approach we just discussed. So bring the referee over, tell the referee you're being abused, and ask them to address this. If the abuse continues, repeat it. Stop the game each and every time abusive behavior continues, and don't restart it until it stops. Referees, please, please, please support your assistant referees. If the assistant referee calls you over and says these spectators are abusing me, you can't ignore it. It is very easy for you to run back out into the middle of the field and just ignore it. Don't do that, because you can run out there. The assistant referee is stuck on the line. They are stuck in close proximity to those spectators. They don't have anywhere to go. So you have to deal with it for them. So in Cal North, we have a policy. Assistant referees ask the referee twice. And if the referee refuses to address it, and please understand when I say they refuse to attempt to address it. If they go and try to address it and they're just unsuccessful in doing so, then just keep repeating the process. But if you ask a referee twice to address the behavior and twice the referee says, no, I'm not going to do that, put your flag down and walk off the field. Report the referee to your assigner and report them to me. And I will have a personal conversation with your assigner to support you. Because at the end of the day, we don't want you working in an abusive environment. And if a referee refuses to protect you as an assistant referee, we don't want you working in that environment. We want you to put the flag down and walk away. And again, when you communicate it to the assigner, please also copy me on that communication so that I can be an advocate for you. This is a CNRA policy to support referees. Luckily, I have not yet had to implement this policy in 18 months of this training now. Luckily, we have referees who are out there doing it for people. But if you ever come across this, just walk off the field. You are not there to be that. A question here: are officials authorized to declare that overly abusive spectators must leave the field? Or are officials only allowed to have the coach just tell the spectators to address it? Unfortunately, the laws of the game do not give referees any purview over the spectators. There is nothing in the laws of the game that references the spectators. This is why we ask you to go and address the coach, because you actually have no authority over the spectators. So once again, what I will say is refuse to restart the game until the problem is addressed. And if your suggestion to the coach is perhaps you're feeling unsafe with that spectator there, then they can deal with that appropriately. But at the end of the day, if they are overly abusive and you fear for your safety, then just leave. Terminate the match and leave. There is no reason for you to do that. We have a question here. What if the spectator is just someone who decided to watch the game from the street? First of all, that rarely happens. And secondly, if they are someone that just watched from the street, they normally don't have a vested interest in the game, which means they're usually not going to behave in a crazy manner. I don't know that I've ever seen a neutral party be abusive to a referee. Normally, it's somebody who has some sort of vested interest, whether it be real or imagined, in that game. So it's highly unlikely that a neutral party is going to be abusive to a referee. They don't have the motivation to do so. So again, please use the only true leverage that you have. At the end of the day, if a player is going to kick a player, you can't control that. If a player is going to punch a player, you can't control that. All you can do is respond to those things. The only true leverage that you have as a match official is whether or not that game starts or restarts. So don't continue the match unless the behavior stops. And if it starts again, stop the match again. And stop it as many times as you need to until that behavior stops. And at the end of the day, I promise you, because everybody is there to see a soccer game, at some point they will stop. It just takes you being proactive to deal with it. Because all the disruptives of you regularly stopping the game will at some point frustrate everybody enough that they'll deal with the problem. If it's players on the field, the coach will deal with it. If it's a coach, the coach will stop because the game's being disrupted. If it's the spectators, the players and the coaches will address it at some point if you are continually disrupting and stopping the game because of the behavior. So please address these issues when they happen. Control your environment. These tools and tactics that we've given you tonight have worked now consistently for me personally for the better part of 5 years. And now as more and more referees use this in Cal North, I still get a tremendous amount of feedback that it's very successful for them. So implement these tactics. The sentences that were specifically quoted here are highly effective, so please write them down and use them. This video will be posted on YouTube, so if you didn't catch everything, you can go back and watch it again and write everything down. But please, please, please use these tactics in a calm, professional, and respectful manner when dealing with coaches. Guarantee you it's going to make your life on the field a lot easier. Any questions on anything we went over this evening? I'm going to read through the comments here and see. We did have somebody ask, how do we terminate a game? The same way you end a game. Tweet, 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 and you walk away. A question here, when will this be posted on YouTube? More than likely tomorrow. We usually have about a 24-hour turnaround, so this should be on YouTube by tomorrow. Thank you, Ian. The correct term is abandon the match, not terminate. Thank you. You as the referee will leave the match. Any other questions? We had a question here, when abandoning a game, what do you put for the match report? A lot of it will depend on what the level of competition is. I would highly advise anytime you do have to abandon a match that you call your assigner or your competition authority. If it's a tournament, go to the ref coordinator, whoever it is, whoever's the person who is responsible for getting you out there. If you do have to abandon a match, please call the person who's in charge of you being there and let them know. You can also ask them what information they need on the game card. Normally in the comment section, all you have to do is write that you abandoned the match and be very specific about the reasons why, so that the competition authority can do any follow-up sanctions that are required for the team who created this. Question here, can I send out a link to the video on YouTube? No, I'm not going to send it out. However, if you go on YouTube and you search California North Referee Administration, we have a channel that has all of these webinars. I think there are 15 or 20 of them up there now, and the referee abuse will be one of them. So you can go, you can actually subscribe to that channel also, and you will get a notification when new videos are posted. So if you want to be following these webinars and others, just go subscribe to the channel California North Referee Administration. Question here, is abandoning a match usual? No, it doesn't happen very often. And in fact, if you use the tactics that we talked about today, you should never really have to abandon a match, because most people are going to calm down and stop doing what they're doing. Coach, or question here, how do I report a booking to a game assigner? Again, that's going to depend on the competition. More often than not, they're not going to require you to put bookings down, which I think what you mean by that is yellow cards. However, if you have a big event in your game, if you have a red card, or if you have a coach dismissed from the match, or if you have to abandon a match, I would just call the assigner or the competition authority and ask what information they want from you. A lot of that is going to vary based on the person, the level of play, and the competition. Any other questions on this topic this evening? All right, then I thank you for joining me tonight. And like I said, this video will be posted on YouTube within the next 24 hours. If you want to get notification, please go and subscribe to the CNRA YouTube channel. Question here, if we are the AR and the ref stops the game and leaves, what do? You leave with them. Quite simple. If the referee abandons the game and you are the AR, you go run out and you stand next to him, and then you walk off the field with them, just like you do when the game ends. If you abandon a match, you're basically saying the game is over, and what you do after a game is the same. You just leave and you fill out your report. Do you need the spectator or the coach's name? No, you do not. And I would not suggest that if you're abandoning a match or dismissing somebody that you try to take the time to find that out. So just walk away, report it, and leave it on the competition authority to figure the rest out. Question here, do we still need to do the score? Yes, you need to tell everybody, because the game is going to either have to be replayed or will go down as a forfeit. Either way, you still report everything that happened in the match, the goals that were scored, any misconduct, et cetera, you still report all of that information. Fill out the game card as though the game took place. Just make a note of what time the game ended and why. Any other questions? All right, then thank you again for joining me this evening, and everybody have a good night.